in the world. All people in their lifetimes were considered mad, were considered eccentric, whether it's Einstein or Picasso or you name it, they were actually considered completely and totally nuts. I'm hoping to be as nuts as them. So, I carry the badge of being eccentric very, very proudly. And in that eccentricity, I have created businesses that are most unlikely and stuff. And that is what resonated when I was starting to think, to read about Dave, is that my weaknesses, my eccentricities, my failures were the ones that actually galvanized me and unleashed me into the future. It wasn't my strength. It wasn't that I went to the top business school and all of those. It's actually everything else. And I think that is a lot of what you will resonate with today. And the last one, which I dare say a lot of you will connect with. One of my biggest weaknesses of my life, and I'll look at all of your eyes and find them. One of my biggest weaknesses in my life is I've spent a lot of my time actually trying to please people. Trying to be good and right and correct. Please my parents, please my colleagues. It was all about pleasing. There's nothing wrong with that. But when it becomes your weakness, the other weakness as an extension of that is I always want to help people. I want to find a way to connect and contribute and share. And that is part of what I'm doing now. And it was really very difficult for me. So I use my failure to try and redefine myself. I use my being a maverick, being mad, being crazy, as to create businesses and platforms that brought us out here. And that's, I dare say, what Dave is going to talk about. When I read his book, that's what connected with me. And the third is that I said I'll go out there and create a platform where I can genuinely connect with people and help people. And so those were the three things in my life, in terms of failure, in terms of challenges, that I counterintuitively rebounded from. And it wasn't even a bounce back. I don't use the word bounce back, I use the word bounce forward. Because I don't, back is that, forward is that. So I bounce forward. And I dare say a lot of the things you will hear today. So what I would like to request you is to really enjoy this experience and enjoy the immersion in terms of your vulnerabilities. And then find how you can take those vulnerabilities and take it to the next stage. I'm going to be a little bit self-serving here, and the platform that I have created for contribution and social science is for you to understand how completely mad and crazy I am. I'd like to start this, please. It's a 90-second video, and that will give you a clear understanding of how completely nuts.
There's a story told of an old man walking down the beach early one morning. On this beach there were thousands of starfish that the tide had washed in, just stranded on the beach. The old man saw a little boy down the beach, picking up starfish and throwing.
How do you get it?
There's
No, it's not there. How do you do it? No, it's there. It's there. Sorry, guys. We just yes.
people walking down the beach early one morning. On this beach there were thousands of starfish that the tide had washed in, just stranded on the beach. The old man saw a little boy down the beach, picking up starfish and throwing them back into the ocean. He walked over to the little boy. He asked him, "Why are you throwing all these starfish back into the ocean? Don't you see you can't save them all? That you'll never make a difference?" The little boy stopped, knelt down, picked up another starfish, tossed it back in the ocean. And he looked at that old man and said, "I made a difference for that one." It's easy to listen to the negative voices saying, "No one can make a difference. But the truth is, this generation is already making a difference all around the world. 100% Mad means to empower you to make a difference. And they're on a mission to raise $1 billion, $1 at a time, for causes around the world. Causes like education, water, and poverty. They guarantee that 100% of the money received by 100% Mad will be deployed into philanthropic projects. I'm talking to you, the generation that sees a problem and wants to fix it. I'm 100% Mad, and I make a difference.
This is my madness. Failure, being a maverick and trying to please everyone. Just have those thoughts in your mind, and please put your hands together for our star of today, Dave Rendall.
All right, it's good to be here today. It was a good introduction because one of my quotes, we're not going to use it today, but one of the quotes I use a lot is from Seneca, a philosopher. He said, "There's no great genius without a touch of madness," right? There's no great genius without a touch of madness, and yet we live in a world that when they're confronted with genius and madness, they don't see the genius, they see the madness, right? And that's what I want to talk about today, because they try to drive the madness from us, and when they do that, we end up losing the genius that we have. So it's really good to be here today. The first question people normally have when they meet me is, how tall are you? The answer to that is I'm 6'6", but I'm 6'9" in heels. And I've been married to my wife for 20 years. I'm 6'6", she's just 5'3". So if you wonder how that works, just realize that in our relationship, deodorant is much more important than breath mints. And so we're married. We have 3 daughters. They're 14, 12, and 9. Those are weird names, but we really like them. And one of the things I'm getting used to in my life is being different. I'm different because I'm tall. I'm different because I'm taller than my wife. I'm different because I'm the only man in the house. But for years, I wished I wasn't different. I wished I was normal. I wished I could fit in. I wished I could be like everyone else. I wished I wasn't constantly in trouble. And then I discovered, and that's what we'll talk about today, all of the advantages of being different, and I want to show you what those are, and hopefully unleash you to find a little bit more uniqueness in your own life. So some people say, Dave, why the pink, right? So living with all women, they're gradually trying to turn me into a woman, right? And so that's sort of my representation of that. But difference isn't always something that we value. Robert Quinn says in his book, Deep Change, that deviance will always generate external pressures to conform. If you perform beyond the norms, the systems will adjust and try to make you normal. Right? Deviance will always generate external pressures to conform. I did a presentation in Australia once. I was introduced to the woman who was managing the presentation for a school. They said, "This is Dave." She didn't introduce herself back. She said, "You're too tall." How do you respond to something like that, right? I'm sorry, I'm working on it. What do you say, right? What she was saying was, you're so big it makes me feel small. You're so big it makes me feel uncomfortable. I'd feel better if you weren't so weird. Deviance will always generate external pressures to conform. If you perform beyond the norms, the systems will adjust and try to make you normal. We live in a world of systems. We live in a world of organizations and structures that oftentimes are designed to prevent us from being uniquely ourselves, and we oftentimes learn being different is going to generate some pressure that I don't want. It would be easier just to be normal. It would be easier just to fit in. So why does deviance always generate external pressures to conform? It's because of the way we think of difference and deviance. So in Australia, for example, they drive on the left-hand side of the road, they drive on the right-hand side of the car. How many of you have ever been to a country where they drive on the left-hand side of the road, where they drive on the right-hand side of the car? Most people in this room. Here's the countries where they drive on the right-hand side of the road, they're in green. The countries that drive on the left-hand side of the road are in orange. How many of you have ever been to India or Pakistan, right? Where they drive on both sides of the road, right? They have their own color on there, I don't know, red for danger. I'm not sure, but it's both. It was just in Pakistan, right? But when people go from a green to an orange, when they go from a right to a left, when people go from a country where they do it one way to a country where they do it the other way, they never say, "Isn't it fascinating that you here have chosen to drive on the other side of the road?" That's never what they say. They ask a rhetorical question. The rhetorical question goes like this. Why do you drive on the wrong side of the road? We see the word different as synonymous with the word wrong. And that leads to all sorts of difficulties. We also see the word normal as synonymous with good. How many of you have employees? Raise your hand if you have employees. How many of you have ever had to fire one of those employees? And when you fired that employee, you were sitting with some of your other firers, and you said this, I'm so tired of having to deal with people like this. When we find our next employee, can we finally find a normal one? Except what you didn't realize is you had just fired a normal one. Normal people don't care that much and don't try that hard. What you wanted was an unusual one like you who cares enough and tries harder and puts extra effort and takes initiative. But you think that's normal. It's not. We think normal is good. We think different is wrong. And I want to separate those two things today. I want us to think differently about difference. And the first part of that is what I call awakening, to see that everything we've learned about weakness is wrong. Now, how did we go from difference to weakness? Here's why. I think the number one way that deviance generates external pressures to conform is that people define our uniqueness as weakness. You're here this morning because in some way or another you probably want to get better. And so you signed up for a seminar. You said, this is something I can go to that would help make me better. And that's exactly the instinct that people use against us to make us normal. Is we say, I want to get better. And they're like, perfect. So there's some things you do over here that aren't good. They don't make you effective. They make you somewhat inappropriate, somewhat unprofessional. And some of the things you need to change to get better are these things. You just need to come back over here towards normal, towards acceptable, towards required, towards the center, right? And that's the exact opposite of what you should be doing. Robert Quinn says in his book, Deep Change, excellence is a form of deviance. Let's just stop there for a second. Raise your hand if you have kids. Okay? Raise your hand if you have kids. Raise your hand if you ever were a kid. So that's, all right, good. So I don't like to leave people out. So if you have kids and they're in school, you want them to be excellent students, right? You want them to be excellent in athletics if they're involved in athletics. But what does it mean to be excellent? It means to be better than all the other kids. It means to do more, to be more successful, to have more, to perform better. Your kid can't be excellent at school and the same as all the other children. They can't be excellent at sports and the same as all the other children. You can't have an excellent business that's the same as all the other businesses. You can't be excellent at... Excellence means to excel beyond most, even above average. And yet you've never sat around, I would guarantee you, with your partner, your spouse, and said, I hope our kids turn into some serious deviants. Right? I hope we have some serious weirdos on our hands here. I just can't wait. Some real nutsos. We don't think that, and yet that's exactly what we should be thinking. The way to achieve and maintain excellence is to deviate from the norm. You become excellent because you're doing things that normal people do not want to do. The center isn't where success lives. And yet we live in a world that's constantly pushing us towards the center. And the last part of that phrase is really important. You become excellent because you're doing things that normal people do not want to do. It's not that they can't. It's that they won't. And even if you come across something... I was doing this presentation in San Diego at the Global Leadership Conference for Entrepreneurs Organization. I was on this huge escalator in the convention center going down. Guy was coming up. He looked at my pink pants. He said, hey, I love those pink pants. I said, thank you. I thought it was over because we're moving in opposite directions. Then he keeps going, though. He goes, I don't have the balls to wear pink pants. Like, that's a little personal for an escalator talk, but I see where you're going with this. I said, some people think I don't have balls because I wear pink pants. Balls are actually optional when it comes to pink pants, not even required at all. What was he saying? What he was saying was, deviance will always generate external pressures to conform. I love the pink pants, but I am not going to wear them because I don't want to deal with the pressure that I would get from other people to be normal. Excellence is doing things that normal people do not want to do. He wasn't going to wear the pink pants because he didn't want to deal with the pressure that he was going to get from being unusual. And if he's not even going to dress in a way that might be slightly unusual, what kind of chances is he going to take in his business? I'm excellent because you're doing things that normal people do not want to do. It's not hard to wear pink pants. Trust me, I put them on this morning just like everyone else puts on their pants. If they're not harder to walk in, nothing happens. Nothing changes. In fact, something does change. It's actually very, very good. People remember me. People sent me Facebook messages before I came here and asked if I was going to wear pink, and then they wore pink at this because it's become a thing. Good things happen. But we're afraid to do it. And so even though good things happen, and my deviance lends itself to a certain amount of excellence, people still don't copy it because they're not going to wear pink pants. And they actually live with somebody who won't let them. Their wife's just like, no, it's not going to, I won't let you leave. You can't go out like that. It's unacceptable. So my thesis today is really simple. What makes us weird also makes us wonderful, and what makes us weak also makes us strong. We live in a world that tells us weird isn't wonderful, that weird is a problem to be solved. And we live in a world that tells us that weakness is a problem to be solved. And I want to show you that the reverse is actually true. So when I was a kid, I was always in trouble. Raise your hand if you were in trouble at school. Raise your hand if you're in trouble at school. I do a lot of talks for entrepreneurs, and when I do it, every entrepreneur raises their hand. There's not a single person, right? When I do a presentation for CPAs, no one raises their hand. They're like, "What? School's awesome. It's like the way the world should be. Who would have trouble there? What's the matter with you?" Right? I thought I'd ask here because it's more mixed group. So I got in trouble at school. I couldn't sit still, couldn't be quiet, couldn't do what I was told. Those are three pretty essential skills at school. Teachers hated me. They called me obnoxious, rebellious, immature, inappropriate. Told me I had no self-discipline and no self-control. Sooner or later, teachers would give up on trying to manage me. They'd send me to the principal's office. I was in 3rd grade, so I was 8 years old. Sent me to the principal's office. He sat me down in his lap, which seems questionable now, looking back on it. He told me, he said, "Dave, there's 3 kinds of bad people in this world." And I was like, wow, this story doesn't even have good people in it. He said, there's bad people, really bad people, and people who are too far gone. He said, "Dave, I think you're a really bad kid. You're on the verge of being too far gone. You need to learn to sit still, be quiet, and do what you're told." Now I want to talk about intentions for a second. Everything we've learned about weakness is wrong. Our parents, our teachers, sometimes our managers, sometimes our society has taught us these things. This principal was simply doing his job, and in his mind, I was on the wrong path. What he was telling me was, "Dave, you're on the wrong path. And at the end of the wrong path is a cliff. And if you keep going on this path, you're going to fall off that cliff. And when you fall off that cliff, you'll get hurt so badly that you'll never get a chance later on, once you're mature enough to figure it out, you'll never get a chance to get back on the right path again." He was trying to save me in his mind from making a mistake that I couldn't turn back from. Because in his mind, sitting still, being quiet, doing what you're told were absolutely essential skills for life. And they also, in his mind, seemed really, really simple and really, really easy. And if I couldn't do that, how was I ever going to do the more difficult things? It's like if you can't do addition, you'll never be able to do calculus. He was trying to help me. He just had the wrong mindset about what success actually looks like. And I'm not the only one who had trouble in school. Ken Robinson said, "Many highly talented, brilliant, creative people think they're not because the thing they were good at school wasn't valued or was actually stigmatized." So let's break that down. Highly talented, brilliant, creative people. Nobody's arguing that first part. That's the way their life turned out. No one can argue that's the kind of person they were. But at school, where we're supposed to predict the winners and the losers, where we had a chance before they achieved those things to say, "I think this person's going to end up here, and I think this person's probably not. You get an A, you get an F. You're a good student, you're a bad student. You show potential, you don't." We told these people they didn't have potential. We told these people they weren't brilliant, they weren't creative, they weren't talented. The thing they were good at, their strength, wasn't valued. It was ignored or denied. Or it was what? Actually stigmatized. We told them that the best thing about them was what? The worst thing about them. That their biggest strength was actually a weakness. And here's the sad part of that story. Some people never end up demonstrating their creativity, their brilliance, and their talent because they believe what they're told at a young age and stop trying. One of my goals was to speak on every continent. I've got 6. I'm still working on Antarctica. The penguins are really hard to deal with. They don't have a lot of conferences. They're not interested in self-development. They're really kind of complacent in the way they go about things, and they just do things like their parents did things. Very instinctive, the penguins. That was a huge accomplishment for me, because as a child who spent his whole life sitting still, unable to sit still, be quiet, and do what I was told, I now get paid to do three things. I get paid to stand up, not to sit down. I get paid to talk, not to be quiet. And I get paid to run my own business, not to do what other people tell me to do. Just this month, I'll do 21 presentations in 7 different countries. I don't just talk a little bit. I talk for a living. I went professional at the very thing that people spent their whole life trying to stop me from doing. My parents had a nickname for me when I was a kid, and it was Motor Mouth. And it wasn't a positive nickname. They didn't think I was cute. They didn't think it was cute. They wanted me to shut up. Okay? And they thought giving me a negative nickname related to how much I talked would sort of shame me into shutting up. And it didn't. And at some point I discovered as an adult that my biggest weaknesses were also my biggest strengths, and I started wondering whether that was true for other people as well. Whether other people were busy trying to get better by destroying the very things that were actually going to help them getting better. And I found they were. And that's what this talk is based on. That's where I came up with this idea that what makes us weird also makes us wonderful, and what makes us weak also makes us strong. This is not about turning weaknesses into strengths. This is about recognizing your weaknesses already are strengths. I didn't turn sitting still, being quiet, and doing what I'm told. I didn't turn that into a strength. That is still a weakness. I'm still bad at all of those things. But I am good at something that is the opposite. I'm bad at that because I'm good at something else. Just like I'm tall because I'm not short. Right? There's no way to be both of those things. The first step to understanding this in your own life is awareness. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Right? And to see that weaknesses are clues to our strengths. But oftentimes we don't have an accurate picture of what our strengths and weaknesses are because of something psychologists call negativity bias. I studied psychology for 6 years. I have a master's degree in counseling psychology, which taught me a lot of the things I'm talking to you about today. One of the things it taught me is negativity bias. Negativity bias says we tend to see what's wrong instead of what's right in any situation, even if what's wrong is really, really small and what's right is really, really big. So imagine I spilled on myself, and had a big stain right in the middle of my shirt. What negativity bias says is every single person in this room during this entire presentation would be staring at that stain and thinking negative things about me as a human being because I'm unable to keep myself clean. Some of you wouldn't be able to focus at all. It'd be like the stain was talking to you. Like, I got some shower wipes in my purse. We just said, we get some club soda on that, just take a short break. But what negativity bias also says is that no matter how positive and how encouraging you think you are, there's not a single person in this room who'd be staring at that stain and thinking to themselves, that Dave Rendall is doing a good job. Because 98% of that shirt is stain-free. Nice job, Dave. Nice job. Right? And yet that's an objective, scientific reality. We can lay the shirt down. We can measure the stain. We can measure the surface area of the shirt. 98% stain-free is actually really, really, really good. But if you were asked to evaluate my appearance at the end of this presentation, some of you would not only give me a failing grade, you'd give me a 0 because you shouldn't have stains on your clothes. And when asked to see, or when asked if we see ourselves clearly, our strengths and weaknesses, most of us would say, yeah. What about with your spouse? Yeah. What about with your kids? Yeah. What about with your employees? Yeah. When in fact it's not what we're seeing. We tend to zoom in on the weaknesses. We tend to miss the strengths. I had a guy last night who was complaining about his son. Said he doesn't do anything in school. I said, did he drop out? He said, no. So he apparently does something in school then. Oh, he's driving me crazy. He honestly says, I want to punch him in the face. I feel the love here. This is after my presentation, though, so I said, is there anything good about him? He said, he's the best human being I know. Maybe you could have that discussion with him. He's kind, he's generous, he's thoughtful, he's caring, he's amazing. And I want to punch him in the face. This man is obsessed with the fact that his child is content with the life that he has and is not striving for other things. He's got a laptop that's 10 years old. He doesn't need a better one. He's doing fine in school. He's not worried about doing better. He's not worried about what kind of job he's going to get. He's going to work it out. He's a content, happy, satisfied person, and it's driving his dad insane. I said, do you not want your child to be happy? No, I want him to be happy. Sounds like he's happy. I know, and it's pissing me off. He just couldn't let it go. We see the stain, we miss the rest of the shirt. And I'm going to show you how we can use that to our advantage today, because if weaknesses are clues to our strengths, Parker Palmer says we're led to truth by our weaknesses as well as our strengths. We can use our natural negativity bias to lead us towards strengths in other people. Let's practice. My youngest daughter is a liar. She is a liar. Profoundly dishonest. She lies so much, I'm going to tell you about my favorite lie that she's told. When you categorize someone's lies, it means there's a lot of them and that this is happening on a significant basis. So she went to kindergarten. She's 5 years old. It's first day of school. They told us to bring a snack, send our kids with a snack. So she had a little bottle of water and a little bag of crackers. The teacher at snack time asked everyone if they had a snack. She said, yes, I have a snack. She got out her snack. But the teacher asked other kids if they had a snack. They didn't have a snack. And some of the other kids, when they didn't have a snack, the teacher gave them some juice and some cookies. Some of you should be feeling the tension right now. No one wants water and crackers when someone else gets juice and cookies. My daughter was not going to take that line down, so she raised her hand. Teacher said, what can I do for you, Sophia? She said, I forgot I'm allergic to water. So here's the question. Right? Here's the question. My daughter's a liar. That's the weakness. And I don't tolerate it. I don't accept it. I tell her it's unacceptable. But I also know, and my relationship with her is transformed because I know there's an upside. Somebody tell me the upside. She's creative. She's imaginative. And if you came to my house, you'd be creeped out because when you went in her room, there's dolls everywhere and they're all looking at you, right? And she can play with those dolls for hours. She can create imaginary worlds in her head for hours. She's far more imaginative than her sisters, and she lies far more often than her sisters. She tries to sell her imaginary world sometimes as reality. That's the downside, but there's an upside. Did you see how that changes things? If I feel like I have a sociopath on my hands, that changes who I am as a parent. Whereas if I understand she lies because she's selling a world that sometimes even she believes in, and that's what makes it even crazier. Sometimes I know she's lying and she sells it really good. I know for sure, but at some point I think I'm the crazy one. There's an upside, right? There's an upside. One of the things we want to do, there's a little bowl up here. I'm going to move it. There's a little bowl up here. They want to put your business card in there. Put your business card in there. One of the things we'll send you is I have an assessment that helps you. You pick your strengths, you pick your weaknesses. It shows you how they're connected. It shows you how the two things go together. But you practiced it right here. Once you start looking for it, you'll see it almost everywhere, but right now we don't. We think they're separate. Right? I think they're separate. What makes us weird also makes us wonderful. What makes us weak also makes us strong. We have to start with awareness and know what those things are. What's the next step? Next step is acceptance. Raise your hand if you've ever taken a personality test of any kind, a DISC, an MBTI, something like that, right? Those are great for awareness. They're terrible for acceptance. You get the report at the end, it's like, this is what you are, and here's how to not be that most of the time with most people from now on. Here's how to tweak it, how to adjust it, how to adapt, how to be more of what you're not. That's the opposite of acceptance. Acceptance says, this is who you are, this isn't going to change, you shouldn't be busy trying to change it, accept it. Why would you want to do that? Well, let me introduce you to somebody. His name is Adventurous Al. Adventurous Al loves to go on trips. He loves to travel. He only works long enough to make enough money, to make enough cash to take on his next trip. When he's on trips, he loves to climb up things and jump out of things. He doesn't own a home. He doesn't even rent a place. He certainly doesn't own a car. He's always on the move. And on one of his trips, he meets a beautiful woman, and her name is Librarian Lucy. Now, Librarian Lucy is steady and dependable. She has a job and she has a career plan. She's working on a graduate degree. She owns a home. She owns a car that she's already paid off ahead of time. She has money in savings. She has money in retirement. She's working steadily and consistently towards achieving her goals. And they meet and they fall in love. It's a love story. Why does someone like Adventurous Al fall in love with someone like Librarian Lucy? Why does someone like Librarian Lucy fall in love with someone like Adventurous Al? Opposites attract. So let's go one step farther. What's attractive about the opposite? Opposites attract, but why? What's attractive about the opposite? The unknown. They want to what?
They want to do the same.
They want to do the same as the other person. The other person compliments you.
They are not what you are.
They are not what you are, right? Yeah, the other person, right? Now, the other person has something I don't have. Would that be fair, right? That's the first part, but it's not everything. Because if you've got Ebola, right, and I don't have Ebola, now he doesn't, or he wouldn't be in the front row, so don't worry about it. We screened all of the Ebola patients farther back, okay? But so that person has something I don't, but I think I should have, right? I've been told my whole life that I'm not this, but I should be this. So they see in the other person everything they're not, but they're supposed to be, and they fall in love, and they get married, hoping that the other person's positive characteristics will rub off on them. Then we check in with them 5 years after they got married. How's it going? I see some of these, right? They're divorced, and there's restraining orders in place, right? But why? Right? But why? It's not because it couldn't have worked out, and it's not because sometimes it doesn't. It's because most of the time it doesn't, and here's why. Because the very thing that attracted them has started to repel them, and the very thing they hoped would rub off on them, the very thing they thought they wanted more of, is the very thing they discovered they do not want at all. Psychologists called this framing. When they got married, they framed all of the other person's characteristics in a positive way, and now they're divorced because they started framing the exact same characteristics in negative ways. Here's what I want to show you today. We don't have strengths and weaknesses. We have neutral characteristics. We are what we are. It isn't good or bad. It's neutral. And you can see all of those characteristics in positive ways or negative ways. It only depends on how you look at it. So let me give you an example. Lucy married Al because he was easygoing, adventurous, and spontaneous. Those are the strengths. That sounds good. She framed all of his qualities in a positive way. But after a while, easygoing started to feel irresponsible, adventurous started to feel dangerous, spontaneous started to feel impulsive. You might say those aren't the same things. They are. Let's take spontaneous and impulsive. Spontaneous, the definition of spontaneous is to do things without planning or forethought. What's the definition of impulsive? To do things without planning or forethought. It's the same thing. So why do we call some of it spontaneous and we call some of it impulsive? Let's give an example. Ladies, imagine the man in your life comes home one day from work and meets you with flowers. It's not your birthday. It's not your anniversary. He's not doing it because he's done something wrong. Ladies have recommended that last one, so I added that because that's what they immediately think. Oh, I know why he's doing it. He just saw flowers on the way home, remembered that he loved you, and thought, I will get them spontaneously. That's a Facebook post right there. Look what my man did for me. What has your man done lately? Because I got a good man right here. And he's not in the picture. The flowers are in the picture, but you get the idea. Okay? The very next day, the same man comes home. Not your anniversary, not your birthday, hasn't done anything wrong. Well, he has. He comes home with a motorcycle, and he didn't talk to you about it. Just decided on the way home, saw a motorcycle just like he saw the flowers, bought it. Now you got an impulsive man on your hands. Now you're back on Facebook. Who's got a man who makes decisions without talking to them first? Doesn't consider their financial future before he makes impulsive decisions about what he wants to do. Right? Your man comes home with a girlfriend. You get all judgy about it. Yeah. Some people do most of what they do without planning or forethought. Sometimes we like it spontaneous. Sometimes we don't like it impulsive. It's always the same thing, though. It's doing things without planning or forethought. Let's reverse it. Al married Lucy because she's structured, responsible, and cautious. That sounds good. But after a while, structured starts to feel like inflexible, responsible starts to feel controlling, cautious starts to feel fearful. Let me give you an example. I get one of my props here, get my water. I'm married to someone who is structured and inflexible. Here's how that works. I'm at home. I'm in my home that I own. And I have water. And I drink it. Delicious and refreshing. I set it down. That was my first mistake. I've lost physical contact with the water. Second mistake, I turn away. I've lost visual contact with the water. And at some point in the very near future, it might only be a minute, it might be 30 seconds, I want the water, so I go back to where I left it. Can anybody tell me where it is? It's gone. If it's a bottle, it's in the trash. Some of you are way more generous than my wife. Some people have said the refrigerator. My wife never puts that in the refrigerator. It's in the trash. If it's a glass of water, it's in the dishwasher, emptied. And when I ask my wife, where's my water? Because I know it was her. Where's my water? She doesn't just answer, she loses her mind. I don't know where it is. No one around here helps except me, and there's mugs and cans and bottles and cups and stuff's growing on some of them, and they've been there for weeks, and I finally cleaned them up. And maybe I did throw away your water. Get another one. Settle down. My wife is structured, but she's also inflexible. I wear one of those camelback backpacks, with a bladder so I can have the straw just in my mouth at all times. She can't take it away from me. I have to maintain physical and visual contact with my beverages at all time, or else they're taken away from me. My wife does not allow for things to be in use. That's clutter. She calls it clutter. I'm like, well, we're just alive, though, and there has to be some things that aren't connected to us. And no, it's not acceptable. Hold on to things. Keep them in your pockets. I wear cargo pants at my house. Right? You get the idea. It's a strength, but it's also a weakness. It's a strength, but it's also a weakness. But here's the key. It's the same thing. There's no way for me to trade her in for a new wife that provides the same level of structure and order at our house without also providing what? Inflexibility. They're the same thing, and that's why we're still married. It's because I'm not under the illusion, I accept it, I'm not under the illusion that somehow there's a perfect person out there that's all upside and no downside. There's no one like that. There are no characteristics like that. So I'll give you one more example related to height. It's good to be tall. We're here at a university. I don't know how they get money to study this kind of stuff, but psychologists study things like height, and they found that tall people get paid more than smaller people get paid for the same work. We think tall people are smarter than they actually are. Scientists do studies. They have people guess how smart different people are, and they always give extra IQ points to the tall people. The taller people get in increments, they give them extra IQ points. I think we deserve those IQ points. Science, disagrees with me. Right? We tend to vote for the taller people in elections. If we can see the difference between the heights of two people, we tend to vote for the taller person in elections. It's good to be tall, until it's not. And it's not good to be tall in airplanes. Every flight that I have starts like this. I'm getting on the airplane, the flight attendant sees me coming, and she says, "Sir, you need to watch your head." Which is hard to do if you've ever tried. And I try to get on the airplane, I get on the airplane like this. You're like, whatever, Dave, we've ducked before. You have, but you're used to re-emerging on the other side. There's no re-emerging for me. That's just all the bigger the plane is. And I shuffle like a hobbit to my seat. Right? But I make sure to get an exit row. I make sure to get a bulkhead. I make sure to get an upgrade so I have enough leg room. But sooner or later, if you fly a lot, you have to go to the bathroom. And if you don't fit in the middle of the plane, the pinnacle, the peak of the plane, you certainly don't fit on the side of the plane where they shove those bathrooms. Now, some people have accused me of exaggerating this next part, so I took the liberty of an airplane bathroom selfie. Give me a little sense of context here. Some of you are starting to set in here. My left shoulder there on your right side is on the ceiling of the airplane bathroom. That's all the taller the room is. What you're seeing is this, okay? The room is this tall. Okay? And what you can't see is I have to do this just to even be in that picture. So it's hard to even get in. I get in, I close the door behind me. I think it's latched. It may not be. We'll find out if someone comes for a visit. And now I'm in, but that's only half the battle because I'm here. The toilet's over there of things that need to go in the toilet. So the first move is to try to get closer. Except the ceiling goes like this. So as I try to move closer, it just pushes my face closer and closer and closer to the toilet. That's not what I'm looking for. So this is about acceptance, and so I accept. This is the way the plane is built. And so I decide that I'm going to form my body to the shape of this airplane bathroom. So it starts with the head. I just press my face into the ceiling. And then the side of the plane kind of goes like this. I just press my upper body in and just kind of form the upper body as I move my lower body in and rotate. Okay. Now, there's a problem with this. And first of all, there's not a lot of visual information now about what's about to happen. And so I had an idea, because my head's already inside anyway. There's a mirror right there, right? There's a mirror, and I can maybe triangulate what's happening, right? Look at this through the mirror. And as I was looking in the mirror one time, I realized, wait a second, there's a sink right there. That is a whole lot higher and a whole lot closer. That seems custom designed for what needs to happen here. We don't have time for all the funny spin-offs of that story. I'll give you one, though. A guy came up to me in Charleston, South Carolina. He's about 6'4", a little shorter than me, a little bigger than me, a little older than me. It was just me and him after the talk. He goes, I know what you mean. Multiple airplane bathrooms. He goes, I don't even try for the toilet anymore. Just go right in the sink every time. I was like, you're disgusting. I said, you got confused. That was a true story. Turned into a funny story. I never said I went in the sink. You thought that. I'm not an animal. I go all over the wall like a normal person does. I'm not disgusting. What's the moral of that story, okay? It's really simple. I don't get to accept the advantages of my height without also accepting what? The disadvantages of my height. If somebody asks me, Dave, is it good or bad to be tall? The answer to that is yes. Height is a neutral characteristic. It is what it is. I am this tall. I'm not too tall. I'm not too short. I am 6'6". And that lends itself to certain advantages. It also lends itself to certain disadvantages. And I can't have one without the other. Every characteristic is like that. Every characteristic that anyone has is a strength and a weakness at the same time. There's an upside and a downside. What was driving this dad so crazy the other day is that his upside is ambition and desire and motivation. That's the dad's upside. The downside is he's a workaholic. The kid's upside is he's content. And he's satisfied. The downside is he's what? He's lazy. He's not motivated. He doesn't care about getting more. He's happy with what he has. The reason the dad's having such a hard time with the son is the son's strengths are the exact opposite of him, and all he sees is the weakness. And he sees his as upside, but also he acknowledges he grew up in a culture, and we heard about it earlier, where if you're not this, and this, if you don't do well in school, you're not a successful person, you're not a good person. If you don't do these jobs, you're not a good person. It doesn't matter who you are, you need to meet culturally defined models of what goodness is. So some of you are thinking, can't we change? Can't we change? Why do I have to accept this? I don't want to accept this. I want to change. I want to get better. Can't we change? It's a good question. So let me introduce you to my grandparents. These are not them. I didn't know that was crucial to say until the other night I was in Kuwait and I'd already done the whole presentation. We were already 45 minutes into dinner. In fact, things were winding up, and finally one of the guys said, I just have to ask. He goes, I've been looking all night. I don't see any Asian in you. I just don't see it. Not even like a hint. Like, I don't see like how it could go from grandparent Asian to you that fast. Like, what happened? I was like, no, those weren't my grandparents. He goes, oh, but it had been driving him crazy the whole night. Like, he was trying to figure out my ancestry, okay? But my grandparents are 95 years old. They've been married for 70 years. They got married in 1945 at the end of World War II. That's a long time. And last summer, my grandma was complaining to me that my grandpa doesn't talk to her enough. My grandpa hasn't been talking to her enough for 70 years. And yet my grandma talks to you like she's on the verge of a breakthrough, like grandpa's just about to become the man that she's always wanted him to be. And my grandpa's got his own plan. It looks like this. Maybe if I stay really quiet and really still, she won't see me and she'll leave me alone. Right? That's his plan. It's 70 years and he's waiting for her to shut up and it hasn't happened yet. And here's what we can learn from their story. And what we can learn from studying psychology is this. People don't change that much. We can help people become more of who they are. We can help people take advantage of the upside of their positive characteristics, but we're not going to be able to eliminate their negative characteristics. And we're not going to turn them into someone else. A good way to think about this is side effects. Every medicine has side effects. There's no such thing as a medicine without side effects. And in fact, the larger the benefit of a medicine, think about something like chemotherapy for cancer, save your life, the side effects are extreme and incredibly damaging. Peter Drucker said it this way. He said, strong people always have strong weaknesses too, where there are peaks, there are valleys. Everyone has side effects. Everyone has peaks and valleys. And the stronger the peak, the stronger the valley. The stronger the strength, the stronger the weakness. If you want strong kids, they're going to have strong weaknesses too. If you want strong employees, they're going to have strong weaknesses too. If you want a strong spouse, a strong partner, they're going to have strong weaknesses too. But we're not comfortable with that. We have a hard time accepting that. But that's just the reality. And if we try to change it, Francis Fry says in Uncommon Service, striving for all-around excellence leads directly to mediocrity. When we try to be good at everything, when we try to tear down the peaks to fill in the valleys, we end up just mediocre at everything. We fail to excel anywhere. We eliminate all the peaks in our lives in order to fill in the valleys. What makes us weird also makes us wonderful. What makes us weak also makes us strong. The next step is appreciation. It's not simple acceptance. It's not grudging acceptance. It's appreciation. We succeed because of our weaknesses, not in spite of them. George Eliot said, every limit is a beginning as well as an ending. And I want to show you the beginnings that come with the limits that we have. So let's take something like dyslexia. Dyslexia means you mix up your letters, and so you mix up your words, and so you mix up your sentences, and so you mix up your paragraphs, so you struggle to read, so you struggle to write, so you struggle in school. And we've been taught if you struggle in school, you'll struggle in life. And that's why they were so surprised when they were studying millionaires in the United Kingdom and discovered that 50%, half of the millionaires in their study had dyslexia, even though only 10% of people in the general population have dyslexia. They were studying entrepreneurs in the United States and discovered that 33% of the entrepreneurs in their study had dyslexia, even though only 10% of people in the general population have dyslexia. Ingvar Kamprad, the billionaire founder of IKEA, has dyslexia. Richard Branson, the billionaire founder of the Virgin series of companies, has dyslexia. But here's the story we hear about people like Richard Branson. He overcame his dyslexia and then succeeded, but that's not what happened. He didn't get a tutor, learn how to read and write, and how to behave like all the other kids and think like all the other kids, and then end up wildly successful. He didn't turn his weakness into a strength. He discovered that his weakness was a strength. And he capitalized on what he had, and he stopped worrying about what he didn't have. Because they asked him, Richard Branson, how has dyslexia affected your success? And he said, strangely, I think my dyslexia has helped. What scientists are starting to figure out is people with dyslexia don't have broken brains. They have different brains. And the same brain that causes them to struggle at school causes them to succeed in life at a higher level than most people. Their brain seems designed for the real world in a way that other people's brains aren't. This is Paul Orfila. Paul Orfila got kicked out of 4 high schools because he was so dyslexic and had ADHD. So he started working for his parents and his brothers and sisters in family-owned businesses and got fired from 4 family businesses by his own family. So he had no choice but to start his own company, so he did. It's called Kinko's. And a few years ago, he sold it to Federal Express for $2.4 billion. And he said this, he said, I think everyone should have dyslexia. And that's what I mean by appreciation. If you offered him a pill to take away his dyslexia, he wouldn't take it because he understands the peak and he doesn't care about the valley. He knows what dyslexia has done for him, and he doesn't want you to take away his dyslexia. Now imagine that. He has a disability, he wants to keep it. That must be because it isn't a disability in the way that we normally think about disabilities. We see disabilities as downsides. We talk about people as disabled, as though it's everything that they are. And it's always negative. But what he's discovered is that it's also positive. And he's used his dyslexic characteristics, his dyslexic mind, to become not just a little bit more successful than most of us, far more successful than most of us. That's appreciation I think everyone should have dyslexia. What makes us weird also makes us wonderful. What makes us weak also makes us strong. Another thing I learned from psychology is that we behave the way we behave because of the way that we think. If we thought differently about ourselves, if we had a new level of awareness, a new level of acceptance, and a new level of appreciation for who we were, it would change the way we behave towards others and in our own lives. And the first part of that is something I call amplification. We would exaggerate weaknesses instead of eliminating them. We'd turn up the volume instead of trying to eliminate them. At school, teachers would try to shame me into being quiet by saying, Dave, I guess you just want to be the center of attention, don't you? And I would love to bring them to one of my seminars like today and be like, ta-da! Yes, I do, and now I am, and there's nothing wrong with that. I built a life around being the center of attention. They saw the downside, they didn't see the upside. It wasn't hard to see the upside. There are thousands of careers based on being the center of attention. Instead of somebody having the intelligence, which doesn't seem too difficult, to say, you talk a lot, I wonder if there was a job that involves talking. What's another word for talking? Speaking. Oh, there it is. We're not talking about brain surgery here, right? But we're so programmed by our world that we don't see the upside, even though it's staring us in the face. So we need to turn up the volume. Oftentimes on the very thing that people are trying to get us to turn the volume down on. I'm training for an Ironman triathlon right now. 4-kilometer swim, 180-kilometer bike, followed by a 42-kilometer run. When I tell people that and when they see the other things I've accomplished with ultra marathons and triathlons, people say, wow, that's impressive. They're praising me for being very, very, very active. Which is interesting. Because when I was a child, I was very, very, very active. How much praise do you think I got for that? I got punished and criticized for it, and now I get praised and rewarded for it. Why? Because the very thing people told me to do less of, I started to do more of, and once I started doing more of it, I got praised and rewarded for the same thing that I used to be punished and criticized for. Now I do more of the talking that people told me not to do, and I get praised and rewarded for what I used to get criticized and punished for. Too often, we don't need to dial it back. We need to turn it up. We're stuck in a middle zone where we're not getting too much good for it, but we're not getting too much bad for it. We think that's the healthy zone, and it's not. Then every time we step out of that, people say, I really love the way you are, but just a little less would be nice. And what you need to do is say, no. It's about to be a whole lot more. So let me give you an example of this from real life. This is Jimmy Kimmel. He's a late-night talk show host. He has his own television show. He's a comedian. And he was recently asked to host the White House Correspondents' Dinner, which, as you can see, is a black tie affair. A lot of prestigious and successful people at that event. And at one point, he walked up to the podium, and he leaned in real close, and it seemed like he was getting serious. And he said, I just want to thank Mr. Mills, my 10th grade history teacher, who told me I'd never amount to anything if I didn't stop screwing around. Mr. Mills, I'm about to high-five the President of the United States of America. And then he did, putting this woman in the most awkward picture of all time. And then he came back to the podium and he said, eat it, Mills. Now, I'm not here to be down on teachers. We talked about intentions before, but Mr. Mills had a model of the world that said you'll never amount to anything. Not even you'll never amount to much. You'll never amount to anything at all. And it wasn't even dial it back unless you stop, unless you turn to zero the screwing around. So what's important here is how Jimmy Kimmel actually ended up succeeding. And he actually ended up succeeding by doing what? By going pro at screwing around. By becoming more childish, more silly, more ridiculous, more immature. If you don't believe me, watch 5 minutes of his show. He succeeded by doing the exact opposite. He succeeded by doing more of what people told him to do less of. He turned up the volume on the very thing. The thing people tell you to turn the volume down on, remember, they'll see our uniqueness as weakness. The deviance always generates external pressures to conform. That's what pressure looks like. I love you. You're so good at your job. You're such a great friend. I love being married to you. You're so special. But if you could just dial it back just a little bit. It sounds so reasonable, when in fact it's the absolute worst thing that you could possibly do. What we need to do is build relationships with other people where they say, you know what I love about you? I love this about you. And you know what? I want you to know that you can be as much of that as you need to be and as much of that as you want to be. In fact, I'd love to see more of it. Those are the kind of people we need in our life. And those are the kind of people we need to be for other people in our lives. We need to draw out that uniqueness and stop seeing it as weakness and find the strength and then give people an opportunity to deploy that strength in the world. How could you amplify your weakness? How could you turn up the volume? What makes us weird also makes us wonderful. If we believe that, we get weirder. What makes us weak also makes us strong. If we believe that, we'd be willing to get weaker. The next step is alignment, though. You might be saying, Dave, I've got these goals, these things I'm trying to do. I had students, they would try to use this against me when I was a college professor. Oh, one of my strengths is not taking tests, so you're saying I get to not do that then? I really don't like writing papers. I said, that's a great story, thank you for that. So it sounds like you should drop out of school then, because that's what school requires. And if you want to succeed in school, you're going to have to figure that out. But if school isn't the right fit for you, that's fine, then you should leave. But I didn't tell you you could go into any environment you wanted and be yourself and be successful. That's not what I said. Amplification matters, but alignment matters. You have to turn up the volume on who you are. I'm not at the job I had 15 years ago, wearing pink pants and waving my arms and shouting all the time and telling people to pay me more money. I found a job that matched who I was, that put the spotlight on my strengths and took the spotlight off of my weaknesses. I get to be myself because I found the match between who I am and where I am. We need to stop trying to fit in and we need to start trying to find the right fit. We don't extort the people in the situations we're in to adapting to us. That's not fair and it's oftentimes not possible. We seek out or create situations that match who we are. So what does that look like? Well, when I was a kid, my parents, we were poor. And one of the ways I measured our poverty was my parents were unable to buy me pants at the same rate that I was growing. They couldn't keep me in pants that fit. I always had pants that were too short, high water pants, floods. Then I would get holes in my pants, and my parents couldn't afford to get me new pants, so they would just patch over the holes. That wasn't cool, and that got me teased at school, and I decided I had to take matters into my own hands, so I got a job at the age of 12 delivering newspapers. There's some young people in the room, so just to explain for a moment, a newspaper is when we used to take the internet, and we would write it out on paper and bring it to people each morning so they could have it with their coffee. And one morning I was delivering newspapers, and I fell off my bike, and I broke my left arm straight through both bones in the forearm. And my arm, my lower part of my forearm came up at a 90-degree angle to the rest of my forearm. They took me to the hospital. They didn't want to do surgery because I was so young, so they put me in traction. Got the bones set the way they wanted to, put me in a cast up to here, sent me home for 3 months. 3 months later, they took the cast off. They sent me home, no physical therapy. I thought I was fine. They thought I was fine. 8 years passed. I went to college. My friend could play the guitar. I could not play the guitar. I wanted to play the guitar. He tried to show me how to play the guitar. And when I tried to learn how to play the guitar, I realized they put me back together wrong at the hospital. In order to play the guitar, you have to turn your hand almost inside out. You have to be able to turn your left hand almost inside out. And I can't do that. I know a little bit of physiology here. I wasn't a biology major, but here it is. This is called supination. This is called pronation. You should be able to do that in both directions with your arm. I can't do that with my left arm. I've got pronation. I don't have any supination at all. And that's when I realized why I had struggled at the drive-thru for so many years. I thought everybody struggled at the drive-thru. I thought it was a bad system for conducting business that would be solved by innovation at some point in the future. But it turned out I was the only one struggling at the drive-thru. I thought everybody was dropping the change because I could give them the money just fine. But then they say, sir, here's your change, and this is all I've got, right? And they're like, sir, you have to turn your hand over like I don't understand. And I'm like, okay. They're like, no, but you also have to reach it out. And I'm like, I'm doing it. My sister-in-law had a great idea. She said she get a basket on a stick and just reach it in there. But it gets worse because a few years ago I was training for a marathon. I got hit by a truck that was going 75 kilometers an hour. He hit me so hard, the doctor explained he didn't break the bones, he sheared them off, meaning he chopped them off of my body like you would with a sword. He nearly tore the lower part of my arm off of the upper part of my arm. This time they definitely did surgery. And they put 2 giant screws through my left arm and held it together. And they definitely did physical therapy because it was very important. But even with extensive physical therapy, I'll never be able to reach and extend my arm out fully for the rest of my life. They couldn't get me all the way back to 100%. And so I'm tall, but I'm tall in the sense that a Tyrannosaurus Rex is tall, right? I don't have the wingspan that you'd expect from someone of my height. And so, like I said, I've been traveling for Australia for about the last 10 years. And in Australia, does anybody know the first place I drove when I drove a car for the first time in Australia? I gave you a hint earlier. What do they do in Australia? They drive on the left-hand side of the road? So they drive on the right-hand side of the car? Ooh, there's an opportunity. And so I went to McDonald's. Because I wanted to know what you've been taking for granted for all of these years. I wanted to know exactly what it was like to pay my money and then just to reach out my arm all the way, perfectly flat, to receive my change and bring it back into the car. Now, why does that matter? Here's why that matters. When I'm in Australia, I'm still disabled in 2 different ways. My arm doesn't turn over and it doesn't reach out. It's damaged in 2 different ways that make me non-functional in the drive-thru. Yet when I'm in Australia, it doesn't matter, not because I've changed who I am, I haven't fixed anything about me, but because of what? Because of where I am. I'm in a situation that puts the spotlight on what I have and takes the spotlight off of what I don't have. Too often, when things aren't working, we assume it must be us and we say, I need to change. But remember, people don't change that much. What we actually should be asking is, how can I change where I am instead of changing who I am? Because situations are powerful. Let me give you an example. There's a company called Specialist Cern in Denmark. They do software testing. Software testing requires 2 things. It requires hyper-focus and the ability to do the same thing over and over again. They hire people with autism on purpose because 2 of the symptoms of autism, a disability, 2 of the symptoms that we diagnose in people with autism and then try to cure in people with autism, or at least adjust, is that they hyper-focus and they like to do the same thing over and over again. He takes people, Thorkill Stone started this company, he takes people who are seen as disabled by everyone else in the world, puts them in a situation where they're no longer disabled, they actually have a competitive advantage over other people, they're better than other people, even though people see them as less than other people. He can't change their disability, he doesn't want to, because in his situation, their disability is a hyper-ability. Michael Phelps is about to swim in the 2016 Olympics in Rio, after already becoming the most decorated Olympian of all time in 2012 in London. More gold medals, more medals than anybody in the history of the Olympics. But what a lot of people don't know is he had ADHD growing up, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. His mom had a decision to make. Do I give him pills to fix him? Or do I help him find a situation that rewards him for hyperactivity? And she got him involved in athletics. No coach in history has ever sent a kid home from practice with a note to his parents. I'm so tired of the way your child just keeps running and running and running and exercising and lifting weights. It just drives the energy level that he has is so frustrating. No coach ever does that. His mom found the perfect match between who he was and where he was, and now we call him dedicated, we call him determined, we call him disciplined, when in fact he's just a hyperactive person who found an environment that rewards hyperactivity. He's an extremely hyperactive person who found an environment that rewards extreme hyperactivity. That's our job as parents. That's our job as managers. That's our job in our own lives, is to find that match between who we are and where we are. Yes, amplify. Yes, turn up the volume. But then start to seek out situations that put the spotlight on who you are, the best things about who you are, and take the spotlight off of the things that you don't have. How can you find the right fit? And if you can't find the right fit, create the right fit. The next step is avoidance. Avoidance. To be the best at some things, you have to be the worst at other things. Raise your hand if you have unlimited time, energy, and resources. Raise your hand if you're one of those people. I will rob you if that's actually true, because if you're unlimited, then why would you care if I took some, right? We don't have unlimited time, energy, resources, do we? We all have 24 hours in a day, and there is some limit to the resources and the energy that we have. So one of the things we need to do is to manage that energy, manage those resources, manage that time in a way that gives us the maximum benefit. And what gives us the maximum benefit is to focus on some things where we have the potential to be the best and stop focusing on things where we do not have that same potential. I love my wife, but I'm glad she's not here because my water is still around when I need it. In her book, Different, Young Mi Moon says, true differentiation is rarely a function of well-roundedness, it's typically a function of lopsidedness. We're so busy trying to be well-rounded, be good at everything, which leads to mediocrity. We already talked about that. Very few people, very few companies are interested in being lopsided. We're interested in fixing problems and being well-rounded, being well-balanced. So let me introduce you to someone. This is Matthias Schlitt. What's unusual about Matthias Schlitt is his right forearm. His right forearm is 18 inches around, which is larger than most people's necks. What's most interesting, though, is his left forearm is only 6 inches around. It's 1/3 the size of his right forearm. If you look at him closely, you'll see that his bicep, his upper arm, is actually smaller than his lower arm. He doesn't have a genetic abnormality. He does this on purpose. He only exercises his right forearm. I've got some suspicions about how he does that, but this is a professional situation. We're not going to talk about it. But a lot of people think, why would you do that? Why would you walk around looking like that? What's it going to hurt for him to have muscles everywhere else on his body? Well, here's the answer to that. Matthias Schlitt is an arm wrestler. And arm wrestlers wrestle by weight class. They stand their entire body on the scale, and they arm wrestle against people whose entire body weighs the same amount as theirs. And yet they wrestle in a way that only allows them to use the muscles in their right arm. So not only do other muscles not help you, they actually hurt you because they count against you on the scale. People ask you, what's it going to hurt to be a little better at your weakness? Here's what it's going to hurt. You're going to have to take time, energy, and resources that you could be building on something where you have the potential to be the best, and you're going to spend it on something where you don't, and you're going to be building up things that don't matter either to you or the situation you've put yourself in, when you could be building on things that do. Matthias Schlitt's genius isn't in what he does. Every arm wrestler pumps up their right forearm. His genius is what he refuses to do. But remember, you become excellent because you're doing things that normal people do not want to do. This is an obvious strategy now. He's on the TV. He's on the internet. He has sponsors. Arm wrestling community knows that he does this. How many copycats does he have? None. Because no one wants to walk around in their daily life looking like an idiot. They could do what he's doing, and it makes perfect sense in the situation that he's in. But people won't copy it because they don't want to walk around looking like a weirdo, looking like a freak, looking unusual, looking strange. In her book Uncommon Service, Frances Fry said, excellence requires underperforming on the things your customers value least so you can over-deliver on the dimensions they value most. Matthias Schlitt figured out I can underperform everywhere. Arm wrestling doesn't reward me for anything except this. So I'm going to over-deliver here, underperform everywhere else. Ooh. How do your colleagues respond when you do that? How does your spouse respond when you do that? How do your kids respond when you do that? How does your industry respond when you do that? We're so uncomfortable choosing a different path that we don't, even though it would work, because deviance will always generate external pressures to conform. So let's look at an example of a company that does this. This is Alt Hotels. They're from Canada. I saw this while I was waiting to go through customs one time. Their entire marketing slogan is, we do less. Just let that sink in for a second. We do less. Not we do more, not we're the best, we do less. We do not have a minibar, we do have a hip lounge. We do less. We do not have a concierge, we do have an app with all the hotspots. And the subtext is actually what? We do not have a concierge so that we can invest the money and the time and the energy that most companies invest in that, in creating an app that is actually useful and helpful and meaningful for you, that you will like so much you will wonder why you ever used the concierge before. We do not have a pool. We do have a pool table. That seems unfair. That's not really a swap. That's not really... We do not have a bellman. We do have a helpful and versatile staff. We do not have room service. We do offer fresh grab-and-go meals. We do not have this so that we can have that. And if you want the thing we don't have, we are not the place for you. They deliberately repel the people who do not want what they offer. But they certainly don't try to do both of those things. That's what leads to mediocrity. They're comfortable bragging about, we don't do. Last night I was talking to a lady who had a very successful software company. She sold it. She got married. She had a child. She's got a great life. She's looking for her next thing. She's going to start doing some coaching. But she says, I don't do coaching the way a lot of people do coaching. And I'm uncomfortable using the word coach. Most coaches do things for people and help people write plans and focus on what people want to do. I want to focus on who people are. And I said, that sounds like perfect copy for your website. Most coaches do this, I don't. Most coaches do this, I don't. Most coaches do this, I don't. That's a great way to differentiate yourself. Here's who I'm not. Here's what I don't do. Here's what our business does. Here's what our business doesn't do. Here's who we serve. Here's who it doesn't serve. Here's who I am. Here's who I'm not. And I'm comfortable with that. I accept that. Francis Fry says, decide what trade-offs you will make, where you will do things badly, even very badly, in the service of great. This applies to places. I love doing this. Freak factor for communities, freak factor for places. What does Dubai do badly? Right? Here's what Dubai does badly. Quiet, calm, and peaceful. Right? No one comes to Dubai for any of those reasons, and if they do, they're going to be sadly disappointed. Dubai is an assault on the senses, right? You go to Dubai because you like intensity, you like activity, you like opportunity, you like variety. Does that make sense? And if Dubai ever tries to be like, well, I mean, it's not that loud, it's not that bright, it's not that intense, it's not on all... Yes, it is. There are other places people go when they want those things. It's not about being everything. Dubai isn't the place for everyone, even to visit. Dubai is a place for people who like things a certain way, and it's absolutely not for people who like things another way. Even little kids get this. Even little kids understand avoidance. They always ask me, Dave, did you play basketball? And I did. Because I was poor, because I was hyperactive, and because I was athletic. I knew I needed a scholarship for basketball in order to pay for college. But what if I told those kids, no, don't judge me. Don't stereotype me. I didn't play basketball. My dream was to ride a horse to victory in the Kentucky Derby. I wanted to be a jockey. That's a stupid goal. It's okay to laugh. It's a stupid goal. It throws away all of my advantages and turns them into what? Disadvantages. And even little kids understand. That's why they ask me, if you have an advantage, it makes sense to take advantage of the advantage. And there's no way, it's physically impossible for me to ever beat someone who's perfectly designed to be a jockey with the body that I was given. It doesn't matter. It's not about intensity. It's not about effort. It's not about hard work. We have to let some things go. We have to avoid some things. We have to leave some things alone so we can focus on the areas where we have the highest potential. But sometimes people think, Dave, I'm so bad in my area of weakness, I can't, even just a little effort, I couldn't help but get better. I got so much room for improvement. Well, that's actually not true. They gave a speed reading course to kids who could read 100 words a minute. They got them up to 150 words a minute after 6 weeks. 50% improvement. Then they gave the same speed reading course to kids who were good readers who could read 300 words a minute. They could already read twice as well as the other kids after the speed reading course. They gave the kids with 300 words a minute the speed reading course. They got them up to 3,000 words a minute by the end of the course. You have the highest potential for success and the most room for improvement in your area of strength, not in your area of weakness. So you have to ask yourself a question. Do I want to get 50% better? Do I want to get 1,000% better? Do I want my business to get 50% better? Do I want to get 1,000% better? Do I want my kids' performance in school or in athletics to be 50% better or 1,000% better? Here's the other lie we're told. The other lie we're told is if your ability improves, if you can improve your ability on something, if you go from really bad on the left to really good on the right, the rewards will go from really low to really high. And they'll get better every step along the way. If you just get a little bit better, you get a little bit more, a little bit better, you get a little bit more, it just keeps going up. It's linear, it's obvious. It's just if you're a 0, it's fine. Just become a 1 and look at how that'll pay off for you. But this is what the curve actually looks like. When you're terrible and you get a little bit better, you get nothing. And when you go from below average to being a 5 to being mediocre, you still get nothing. And when you go from being average to being slightly above average, you still get basically nothing. If you want maximum reward, where do you want to be on this chart? Well, how would you get there? You would start with the things where you were already a 7. You were born an 8. You've always been organized. You've always been intense. You've always been competitive. You've always been persistent. You've always been analytical. You've always been whatever. You've got a strength. You build on it. You get better than most people because you already had a head start. You already had an advantage. When I told people I can dunk the basketball, they're like, whatever, you're already there. Right? Doesn't that make more sense, though, to start with things where you're already there? So let me give you an example. In American baseball, Major League Baseball, minimum wage is $500,000. You have to be one of the best 500 players on earth at this very particular game. But if you do, they'll pay you $500,000. They cannot pay you less. It's illegal. But the highest paid player in baseball last year made $30 million for 1 year. 60 times what the lowest paid player made. He was very, very good, and then he got a little bit better, and the rewards became exponential. Getting a little better where we're already good doesn't just pay off a little bit, it pays off to a tremendous degree. The rewards are outrageous. What should you stop doing? The only way to become the best is to be willing to be the worst. The only way to have peaks is to be willing to have valleys. And instead of tearing down the peaks to fill in the valleys, what we actually need to do is dig out the valleys to pile it up on top to make a higher and higher peak. The last step is affiliation. You're like, Dave, it's got to be done. I've got to do it. No, you don't. It has to be done, but it doesn't have to be done by you. We need to partner with people who are strong where we're weak. Remember Paul Orfalea? He ran a company worth $2.4 billion, but he can't read and write. How do you run a company worth $2.4 billion when you can't read or write? What do? You hire people who can, right? And guess what? When you offer people money for reading and writing, they will in fact read and write for you. That's obvious, but here's the problem. The reason we don't do this more, the reason we don't partner with people who are strong where we're weak, if you have a child right now who can't read or write, you are not sitting there introducing them as like billionaire in training right here. Look at this guy. Yeah, we're just going to outsource that stuff. The old model is learn to read and write. We're just going to offshore it. It's just really not a thing. You're not feeling that way. Even though I'm showing you someone who's had most people's definition of success without what we think is an essential fundamental ability, we're still not happy, we're still not comfortable when people don't have that themselves. But there's another problem, and here's the biggest one. The reason we don't partner with people who are strong where we're weak is because the people we need the most are the people we like the least. The people we need the most are the people we like least. When confronted with someone who has a strength where we have a weakness, we don't see their strength. We see their what? We see their weakness. We see that they are weak where we are strong, instead of seeing that they are strong where we are weak. The people we need the most are the people we like the least. I'm messy. My wife likes things organized, so she's always taking and hiding and throwing away my stuff. And it infuriates me. Because she has something I don't have, right? But she also doesn't have something, a comfort level with being sort of an animal, right? So what's the upside? Why are my wife and I still married? Here's why. Because although it frustrates me, I've come to see it differently. Remember, inflexibility is also structure. So my wife can be on a trip, and my kids say, Dad, my toy needs more AA batteries. I don't know where they are. So I call my wife, honey, where's the AA batteries? She says, you go down the hall to the right. On the third shelf, in the back, there's a plastic tub labeled batteries. Right next to the plastic tub that's labeled label maker. In the back of the tub is where we have the AA batteries. I believe we have 5 AA batteries. 3 are Energizer, 2 are Duracell. Be careful, one of them is rechargeable. And at that point, I'm not mad at my wife anymore. I'm thinking to myself, I am so hot for you right now. My wife and I are still married after 20 years because I focus on not only the upside, but the benefit, the complement that she provides to my life. My life would be less structured without her. She has a strength where I have a weakness, and so my life is better without me having to be better. Does that make sense? My life is structured without me having to structure it. Peter Drucker said, organizations exist to make people's strengths effective and their weaknesses irrelevant. Our businesses have to have certain things, but it doesn't have to come from us. It comes from partnership with other people. The problem is so many of our organizations don't make people's strengths effective and their weaknesses irrelevant. They do what? They do the opposite. Our schools should make people's strengths effective and their weaknesses irrelevant, but too often all they do is point out people's weaknesses. Our families should exist to make people's strengths effective and their weaknesses irrelevant. Too often they do the opposite, though, don't they? Who's strong where you're weak? Start with the people that drive you crazy. And remember my example and get the assessment. Look at the weaknesses in the chart that I'll send you, then look next to it and see the strength that goes with that weakness. Also, I see a lot of people taking the pictures of the slides. We'll send you the slides. Just get us your card. That's the 21st century version of like a lighter at a concert, right? I know I'm doing a good job. People, ooh, that's a good one. Snap a picture of that. All right, so let's wrap it up. This is the Leaning Tower of Pisa here. It's been leaning since 1173. 843 years it's been leaning. It's been tipping over since the very beginning. They built it on a bad foundation. But in the 1930s, Mussolini decided that this made Italians and Italy look bad. He thought it was a scar on the reputation of Italy, and he ordered his government engineers to fix it, to straighten it up. We live in a world that loves to straighten things up and straighten things out. But his engineers tried and they failed, which was a really lucky thing for the city of Pisa. Because millions of people have traveled millions of miles and spent millions of dollars to see what? A tower that leans. And if you don't believe me, somebody tell me what this building is called. Exactly. Right? It's unique, it's old, it's well constructed, and no one cares. In fact, I didn't even know this building existed until I found a proper photo, because normally this gets cropped out like a bad ex-boyfriend. I thought the Leaning Tower was in a field all by itself, and so did you, because that's what most of the pictures look like, because they cropped this out, but it's actually almost touching this other building at the bottom. But nobody cares. Not only does nobody care, nobody goes, well, I visit the tower because I feel bad for it because it's leaning. They don't see it even though it's leaning. They see it because it's leaning. And the people who run the tower now say that. They say because of its inclination, the tower has become the object of very special attention. If you want your life, your work, your business, your children, your partner, your spouse to become the object of very special attention, if you want good things to happen, you have to get comfortable with the inclination. And see, it's because of our inclinations that we become the object of very special attention. It's our inclinations that make us succeed. We think if I can just build a good, solid business, everyone would come to see me from all around the world. They don't. They go to see the broken one right next door, and it drives you crazy. The people who run the tower now say it's important to keep the current tilt due to the vital role that this element played in promoting the tourism industry of Pisa. They're trying to keep the tilt, and that's what I'm telling you. Preserve the inclination in yourself, in your children, in your spouse, in your employees. Find it, awareness. Accept it. Don't try to straighten it up. It's not going to straighten anyway, no matter how much you try. Appreciate its value. It's because of the inclination. Amplify it. Maybe make it lean a little bit more, but certainly not less. And then find that alignment. Find that fit. Find those people who want it that way. Find the part of the world that wants it that way. Find the situation that rewards that person for being exactly that way. And then stop trying to straighten it out. Stop trying to fix it. E.E. Cummings said, we do not believe in ourselves until someone reveals that deep inside us something is valuable, worth listening to, worthy of our trust, sacred to our touch. That's my mission in life. I travel around the world showing people that deep inside them something is valuable. Oftentimes the thing that people told them was the least valuable thing about them is actually the most valuable, that it's worth listening to, worthy of our trust, sacred to our touch. But I can't talk to everyone. My hope today is this, that when you leave here today, you'll start seeing that deep inside the people around you, something is valuable, sometimes the thing you thought was the least valuable. Worthy of our trust, sacred to our touch, worth listening to. You'll see it in your kids, you'll see it in your partner, you see it in your spouse, you see it in your coworkers and your employees. And you'll not only see it, you'll show them, you'll communicate it to them, you'll help them find that, and then we create a revolution. Because I think what makes us weird also makes us wonderful, and what makes us weak also makes us strong. Thank you very much.
Absolutely amazing. Not one person moved. Normally people leave halfway through the session. Do we have about 5-10 minutes for just a couple of questions? If you would take a few questions, please.
Yeah, that's fine.
We keep it short and quick questions, and then basically it's your life coaching. So, we need all the business cards there. You'll get some slides and an assessment, and then there is a feedback form that's also there.
Hey, go ahead. Great suit in the back there. Go ahead. Yeah. So it is important to preserve the current tilt, right? So if you look real closely, they have guide wires and other things holding it up. So they're not trying to straighten it up, but they are trying to keep it from falling down, right? So that's the preserving the current tilt. It's about, remember, we can't change who we are, but we can become more of who we are. So it's not saying don't try to do anything, don't try to get better. It's get better in that direction, right? Get better in that direction. Continue to get stronger in that area where you're strong. I'm trying to get a better become a better speaker. But speaking was the thing I needed to start getting better at, not being quiet, right? Not being quiet. Okay? Somebody else had their hand up somewhere in the middle. Go ahead.
Yeah.
What are the characteristics that are more that you want to change, like discipline? That's one. These are all characteristics of neutral. I mean, it's more discipline, you achieve more. So just wondering whether
Are there some characteristics you do need to fix? Some weaknesses you no, I don't think you are. I don't think there are. And that's one of the things I show with the assessment. So there's 52 strengths, 52 weaknesses, and one of them is discipline, right? So we think discipline is good, right? The downside is, like you said, you achieve more things. Well, we think the value in life is achieving more things, but oftentimes people who achieve more things actually don't have the same satisfaction and happiness of people who achieve less, but who are more content and satisfied with what they've achieved. So achievement has value. And it's good if you're that kind of person, but also a certain amount of contentment, a certain amount of happiness, a certain amount of satisfaction with what you have is a strength as well. The downside of that is those people tend not to seem as motivated and ambitious. And here's another thing I would argue about. There's an opera singer called Pavarotti, right? And he said, people thank me for they're impressed by my discipline. He said, it's not discipline, it's devotion. I think we all have discipline when we're in the area where we have the potential to be the best, and when we're working on our strengths, when it comes naturally, when it fills us up, when it energizes us. So remember, the teachers told me I was undisciplined. Meanwhile, I was delivering newspapers at 5 o'clock every morning. I was playing sports for multiple hours every single day. They told me I was undisciplined in the activity they wanted me to be disciplined in, but I was not undisciplined. Does that make sense? And so I think sometimes discipline, we seem undisciplined or we feel undisciplined because we're trying to exercise discipline in an area that doesn't match us. I think discipline really becomes unnecessary when we're doing the things that fill us up as opposed to the things that drain us. Go ahead. Yep, in the black shirt, yep.
So you said that your daughter at this age she's just been lying about little,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's nice now because in the beginning you think, okay, it's cute, she's lying about water.
Right.
And how do you deal with it so that you maintain her creativity, but without having her turn into like a pathological liar in the future?
Yeah,
There is that risk.
Yeah. So we do tell her that lying is wrong and inappropriate, right? What I'm saying, the balance comes from we don't think she's just a liar. So we spend time encouraging her imagination instead of badgering her and communicating that she's a liar. Does that make sense? So if my parents would have said, Dave, sometimes you need to be quiet, but it's also awesome that you like to talk and entertain people, and let's give you opportunities to do that, it would help you see both sides of it, but I didn't. And so sometimes when our kid has a problem, we focus on the stain so much that they start to think that's all they are. And they also fail to see the link. So we teach her that, and now she understands it. She said, yeah, and sometimes my imagination causes me to tell lies and say things that aren't true as though they are. So she understands the link between those two, and so she can manage it. So that becomes an alignment issue. So that maybe goes to your point. I do think there's sort of moral right and wrong at some point. I think we extend that far more broadly than we should sometimes. So a good way to think about it is with food, especially when you travel. It's easy to see somebody order something and put something in their mouth and you just think, that is so gross, that's so disgusting. And when you say that, you're wrong, because why would they have paid money to put that in their mouth if it was in fact gross and disgusting? What you're saying is, I don't like it, but instead of saying I don't like it, you're saying it's wrong. And as parents, too often we say I don't like it by saying it's wrong, and we tell the person they're wrong for behaving that way when it's just not our preference. So I think the number of moral things that we need to protect our kids from, and the number of weaknesses that we need to repair, or behaviors that we need to prevent. And again, get a copy of the book, because the examples are pretty outrageous. There are people who go into prisons, and they have found that people who are in prison are far more likely to be successful entrepreneurs once they get out, because they have risk-taking, they have leadership abilities, they can get things done. Instead of going in and seeing prisoners as broken people because they've done immoral and wrong things, they see the massive potential those people have. Instead of treating them like a broken person, they treat them like someone with potential if they just directed it in a good way instead of a bad way. So it goes back to the neutral characteristic thing, right? Imagination is a neutral characteristic. You can use it for dishonesty, you can use it for storytelling and other sorts of things. And so we also over-exaggerate the extent to which bad behaviors and things like that are destructive and things like that, and we miss all of the examples of people. There's a book called The Wisdom of Psychopaths, and a guy did an entire study. Psychopaths end up in prison. They also end up at the top of they're the CEOs of our companies. They're also the people who protect our countries in secret service and in things like that. And if they weren't a psychopath, they couldn't do the things they do. Psychopaths, for example, their heart rate goes down when people start shooting at them. When you start shooting at normal people, they panic and everything goes crazy. Their ability to do that, though, makes them weird, makes them strange, and we think that's a problem. You shouldn't be like that, and it does lead to some criminal behavior, but it also leads to some very, very positive behavior or whatever. It's not psychopath that's bad, it's when you use it for the wrong reasons. One of the personality assessments I use tells you which famous people are like you with your personality. So one guy was bragging one day, he finished his and he's like, look, Gandhi's got the same personality as me. And the guy said, yeah, look farther down, so does Charles Manson, right? A serial killer. They both used it, they just used it in different ways. Does that make sense? So I'm trying to show my daughter she has something that can be used in positive ways, but I certainly push the use it in the right way, not use it in the wrong way.
One last question.
Okay, right in the middle there. I appreciate this guy. He had to work hard. Okay, look where he's sitting. Look where he's sitting. He's got two cameras, and I move a lot. So he was like, it was like a full contact sport for this guy, and I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
You must have interacted with a lot of organizations. So how many organizations have you come across who believe in this particular philosophy that you are spreading?
Very, very, very few. Because we live in a world that teaches it, right? I was presenting this and I met a lady from Sweden, and she said they actually have sort of a phrase, a word in Sweden that means you're not special. And that when you do things that are special, the people around you say that word to remind you you're not special. Don't try to be special, and don't be that way, even though it's obvious you were being special, which is what caused people to say that. We have sayings in our societies that say when the nail sticks up, it gets hammered down. When the thing grows up high, it gets chopped off. And so we live in a world that communicates this message all the time, which is why I'm so passionate about it, because I want to show people the opposite is also true. And sometimes those lessons we've heard at a macro level, right? It happens at a macro level. And so many people, the companies that don't do what I'm saying aren't trying to be bad companies. They're trying to be good companies by following what they see as the model of the way things work. And what I'm trying to show people is there's another model. There's a concept in systems theory called equitonality that says there's more than one way to get to the same place. If I told you I need to get from here to the airport, I bet if I talked to 20 people, you could tell me 20 ways to get there, couldn't you? And you tell me why your way was better, guess what? They all lead me to the airport, don't they? But when we find a really good way to the airport, we want everyone to take our way to the airport, not realizing that would cause traffic on the way to the airport. Right? And so I'm just trying to show people those other ways can work sometimes, but I also think there's another way we've been missing, and we've heard this one thing so much, and there's very few people saying what I'm saying, which is why I'm so passionate about it. Right?
This gentleman is also insisting. He's
okay.
Waving his hands.
All right, if we're going to do that, the blonde lady over here had something she was going to say when I was talking about the... Yeah, I was going to guess. I didn't want to stereotype you because you're a tall blonde woman, but I thought that might be exactly what was about to happen. So what's the word? What's the word? Yeah, see, and that's why I can't say it. So she did a good job. So that proves I'm not making it up. It's a Swedish word that says you're not special. All right, over here.
Just one question. I mean, what's the turning point? Because normally when you are like young and you're a small kid and you're in school and you're being, trained or disciplined in certain ways that society appreciate. But what if you're kind of a lion and you are put in the circus and then you just forget about hunting? And then is there a turning back when you're like 40, 50, 30?
Yes, I think there's always a chance to turn back. It's never too late. I mean, one of the things I did a presentation one time for a financial services company, and they asked people this question. They said, if you're 60 years old today, you have a 3% chance of living to what age? And the answer was 120. So even if you're 60, the potential exists, you're halfway there. So there is no point at which there's no turning back, there's no value. And like you said, you gave a great example. When they cage animals, when they put them in a zoo, when they put them in a circus, sometimes they forget who they are. But it doesn't mean they're not that anymore, they've just forgotten it, right? And that's my job to help them remember, but that's also your job to help them remember now that you know, right? So I think that's the thing, is to reignite in them, to remind them and start putting them in situations where they remember and where they start trying to build those strengths back and get those skills back, and they start to experiment and start to dabble in a little bit and say, what if what I've been told isn't true, and what if the opposite is true, and what if I started doing those things? I didn't figure this out until I was in my mid-30s, and I started realizing by accident I was getting rewarded for the things that I used to be punished for. People were saying, Dave will do the presentation, when I was trying to be quiet and not stick out and do all the things that society had told me were the right things to do. But people saw it inside me. Psychologists call that leaking. Even when you try to stuff down inside of you things that people have been telling you aren't good about you, it will come out in some ways. When you're lying, the truth comes out in your body language in other ways, even when you try to stifle it down. And so when you're trying to be someone you're not, it's still there somewhere. It's about seeing those leaks and starting to allow those to just come out fully. Right? That's a great question, great analogy.
Thank you very much.